I can only achieve my goals if I'm well rested. Well, thankfully, I have a Casper mattress helping me get a great night's sleep. Its unique combination of foams provides the right pressure relief and comfort, so you will feel perfectly balanced. And thanks to the breathable material, you're guaranteed to sleep cool. Plus, the mattresses are built to last for years. Basically, since I've gotten my Casper, I've gotten the best sleep ever. I want you to try Casper for 100 nights in your own home risk-free. You heard me. They will ship it to you for free in a very compact box. And if you don't love it, they come pick it up and refund you every dime. Try yours for 100 nights in your own home with free shipping and returns. Go to Casper.com/Savage Podcast. Enter the promo code Savage Podcast for $50 towards the purchase of your mattress of select mattresses. You heard me. Go to Casper.com/Savage Podcast. Enter the promo code Savage Podcast for $50 towards the purchase of your mattress. Casper.com. Terms and conditions apply.
Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
Dr. Ford, as you well know, is more well-known in academia than Freud, Jung, and Adler put together. She is a genius, which is why suddenly the Democrats refer to her with tones of respect as Dr. Ford. So we looked into Dr. Ford's background as a scientist, and you'll be very interested to learn what her publications actually are. And I'm trained in science. I have a Ph.D. from the University of California at Berkeley. Yes, it's true. Great degree, great university, so I can read science. And I was interested in what her scientific publications might look like, and I have that for you. And it's gonna actually shake you to your knees when you find out what she specializes in. But first, I want to go into the issue of childhood memory and imagination, because this occurred how long ago? 36 years ago? 36 years ago, she remembers making out with a guy who was aggressive with her on a bed, which Barbara Boxer turned into rape. Now, this is so sickening, but Barbara Boxer being one of the sickest people in the history of the U.S. Congress, thank God, that curse is gone. But she's not alone in calling this rape. Now let's turn the clock back for a minute. How many minority teens have actually raped people, been tried for rape, and been let off the hook by Barbara Boxer and all of the other liberal women who say that they're just children? That they were simply children. And we can't hold children accountable to the same level that we can hold adults accountable for. And so while it looked like rape to the woman who was actually raped, it wasn't really rape because, A, they say it wasn't rape, and B, it was a minority, so therefore it's excused. But now let's go to Kavanaugh. At the worst, Kavanaugh is accused of what? Tell me what he's accused of. Number two, how old was Kavanaugh at the time of this alleged incident? Why, he was a teenager. He himself was a youth. She was a youth. They were both teens. So she's a teen, he was a teen, and now he's the worst rapist on the planet according to the vicious Democrat, liberal, socialist, communist women from hell. So that's an important point to remember. He was also a child, just as she was. And so while children are often said, well, you can't hold them accountable because they're just teens. They don't have a fully developed brain. It's an adolescent brain. Kavanaugh's brain apparently was developed enough for him to be called an adult rapist by Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein and all of the vicious women in Hollywood. But let's put that aside again. Christine Blasey Ford, genius psychologist, genius professor, Dr. Ford is, and she is widely published in her field. So I looked into what her publications are. And it's very interesting what she specializes in. And since I have a background in phytochemistry, some of this makes sense to me. One of her articles, which was published not too long ago, is on the efficacy and safety of mifepristone for the treatment of psychotic depression. Now, if you don't know what mifepristone is, I mean, you may not have heard it. It's the abortion drug, RU-486. So she's interested in seeing whether this abortion drug, RU-486, can be used to treat depression. I'm not making this up. I'm not inventing this. Do you understand the significance of what I'm telling you? You will by the time the show is over. She's interested in treating depression. And so what is she looking into? The abortion drug RU486. So in 2013, Dr. Ford published an article called Trough Plasma Concentrations of Mifepristone correlate with psychotic symptom reductions, a review of 3 randomized clinical trials in current psychiatry reviews. So she was looking at whether concentrations of the abortion drug, RU486, reduce the symptoms of depression. What does this tell you? It tells you whatever you want to make it. This is the woman who accused Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh of sexual assault, who is pushing, through her studies, using the abortion drug, the morning after drug, RU486, to treat depression. Unto itself, that's not a big deal. However, if you are a scientist, you understand how significant this is. Given the overall picture of her politics and the fact that the entire abortion racket is behind making certain that Kavanaugh is torpedoed, because the last thing they want is their money train to stop. If someone were to control late-term abortion, for example, all of those witches who are killing babies in the 3rd trimester would be out of business, wouldn't they? So don't for 1 minute forget who is behind Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford is strongly supported by the abortion industry. If you look at her publications, which I have done, and I'm the only one in the media to have done it, you will see what I just told you to be true, or I wouldn't have said it. She's interested in Mifepristone, RU486, the morning after drug, in how it treats depression. Put 2 and 2 together, and you'll come to the conclusion that I've come to, which is that it's the abortion racket that is behind this whole scandal that they've created about Mr. Kavanaugh. But now let's go into the whole issue of the scandal of this woman, because her scandalous accusations are really the issue. It's her scandalous accusations which are impossible to prove. Now, here's an event that occurred 36 years ago. How can we tell whether it was true or false? Barbara Boxer jumped to the conclusion it was rape. The vermin in Hollywood, who apparently engage in these things and are an expert in rape, because I'm not, they're all sure it was rape. I guess that's part and parcel of their currency in Hollywood, but I wouldn't know. I'm not in Hollywood, but we have a montage of them. The Hollywood says that she was raped, all of Hollywood. Isn't that sick? But anyway, let's look at the whole issue of, is it real? Well, how do we know what's real and what's imagined? Well, we don't know. So how real, to what degree of certainty do we have that childhood memory is not strictly imagination? Well, we found a study sent to us by a PhD expert in the field that is entitled as follows, from the Psychonomic Bulletin and Review from June 1996, Volume 3, Issue 2, pages 208 to 214, for those of you who want to look it up. And its title is very telling as regarding Dr. Ford's accusations. Here's the title, which you can probably pretty much figure out. Imagination Inflation. That's the title of the article. Imagination Inflation. Imagining a childhood event inflates confidence that it occurred. Does that make sense, Jim? Just saying that title, if you were the average person driving around in a car on the Cross Bronx Expressway. Could that guy who went to high school understand what I just said? Here is a scientific study that has nothing to do with this case directly, I think, but it's very important for you to understand that when a child imagines an event, occurred, it increases confidence that it actually occurred without actually knowing if it occurred. That's the study. So this study, Imagination Inflation, imagining a childhood event, inflates confidence that it occurred. And I'll read you the abstract, which is a summary in the science article. Counterfactual imaginings. Did you hear what I just said to you? You never heard that. That's called lying or making something up. But in the psychology literature, it's called counterfactual imaginings. How do we know that this is not an example of counterfactual imaginings? But what's even more telling in this article is stunning. Listen to the first sentence of this article for those of you who want to know something about the truth. Counterfactual imaginings are known to have far-reaching implications. Oh, do they ever? In this case, they're going all the way up to the Supreme Court. And they go on. In the present experiment, We ask if imagining events from one's past can affect memory for childhood events. We draw on the social psychology literature showing that imagining a future event increases the subjective likelihood that the event will occur. The concepts of cognitive availability and the source monitoring framework provide reasons to expect that imagination may inflate confidence that a childhood event occurred. That's a key point right there. Imagination that an event occurred may inflate confidence that a childhood event actually occurred. So if a person imagines something happened to them as a child, it increases confidence in that person that that event actually happened. You hear what I just said? If you imagine you were raped or molested by your uncle, God forbid, and the more you keep saying, I think it happened, what it does is increases confidence that a childhood event occurred. See? The more you say it to yourself and the more others tell you what happened, the more you know what happened. However, people routinely produce myriad counterfactual imaginings, i.e. daydreams and fantasies, but usually do not confuse them with past experiences. Daydreams and fantasies, not confused with past experiences. Daydreams and fantasies. Now, we know the whole Democratic Party is filled with fantasy about their economic policies because everything they ever promised they failed to deliver, while everything that Trump they said didn't deliver, he did deliver. So by being an outright naked capitalist, the economy is booming like it hasn't boomed in almost 50 years since World War II, since post-World War II. And so they can't accept that because it doesn't fit with the socialist agenda of a top-down economy. But we're getting a little far afield here. To determine the effects of imagining a childhood event, we pre-tested subjects on how confident they were that a number of childhood events had happened. And then we asked them to imagine some of those events and then gather new confidence measures. For each of the target items, imagination inflated confidence that the event had occurred. For each of the target items, imagination inflated confidence that the event had actually occurred in childhood. This has far-reaching implications for those of you out there who care about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. For those of you who care about the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, this article is key to you trying to understand what actually happened. Now, I think what I should do for you is post this article, Imagination Inflation, Imagining a Childhood Event, inflates the confidence that it occurred. But before I take this break, I'm going to talk more about counterfactual imaginings and their far-reaching implications, in this case, reaching all the way up to the Supreme Court. For those of you who are interested in objective truth, I know you will stay tuned. For those of you who are fools and have your minds poisoned and already made up and claim that Kavanaugh raped this woman, do me a big favor. Turn this show off immediately. You're not wanted in the auditorium.
Savage.
So whether you know it or not, by the way, to the 3 or 4 people who were left listening to the show, I will address the next segment to you. The rest of you left already. You wanted to hear the sound of a nail gun saying the same things you've heard now for a week straight on every show in the history of radio and television. But for those of you who want to hear something other than a nail gun going off on this issue, I'm giving you a little science. And we're looking into the background of the accuser, Dr. Ford, the most famous psychologist since Freud. And I discovered for you that she pushes mifepristone, which is the day after drug, the morning after drug, RU-486. She pushes mifepristone to treat depression. So now I want you to come with me with your imagination to the Senate hearings that will occur on Monday. And Michael Savage is the senator from California, instead of the witch who belongs in prison. So Senator Savage gets to ask Dr. Ford a couple of questions. And the first thing Dr. Savage says to Dr. Ford is, "Good morning, Dr. Ford. Pleased to see you here. As a fellow scientist, may I ask you, your very interesting studies using mifepristone, RU-486, to treat depression are intriguing to me. Dr. Ford, did you or have you received any funding directly or indirectly from the manufacturer of this abortion drug to do your research?" Well, you know what would happen. It would be like out of The Godfather. There'd be a roar and a gaveling down. "How dare you bring that up? Senator Savage, sit down. You can't ask that question. Sit down. You can't ask that question. It would be the equivalent of bringing in the cousin from Sicily who doesn't say a word and silences the witness. But that's what would happen, but that's why I'm not a senator. That's why I am a talk show host, because I can ask these questions with impunity. You can't. And so for the rest of you who are interested in this stuff, from a different take, I'm going to go to another study on how accurate is the memory of a child. How accurate is it? Why do you assume a person can remember what happened in their childhood so clearly? Well, we don't know. Many of you were led to believe things happened to you as a child during these last 20 years of pop psychology on television and whatnot, that you were molested or something happened to you. Maybe it did happen, maybe it didn't happen. You have no evidence. How do you know? How accurate is a child's memory 20, 30 years later? There's science on the issue. Imagination inflation is what it's called. Imagining that a childhood event occurred, if you just imagine it, it inflates confidence that it actually occurred. Important study by Gary, Manning, and Loftus and Sherman. Psychonomic Bulletin and Review, 1996, Volume 3, Issue 2, 208 to 214. And listen to some of the key words. Many of you went to college and you took some psychology. Here's what they conclude about childhood imagination, childhood memory. People often imagine the past as being different from what it really was. That's the first sentence in this article. Did you hear that? Clint, is that amazing? People often imagine the past as being different from what it really was. Many investigators have argued that people spontaneously imagine alternatives to real events more in some settings than in others. These mental musings, called counterfactual thinking, have far-reaching implications. They influence judgments of regret, perceived happiness, and causality. And I can read more. I'm not going to read you the whole study. I want to speed to the end of this scientific article because they give you the methods of the study and all, as they do in scientific papers. And then they they give you the results. It's astounding how they conclude this article. Of course, I'm out of time already. If it was a podcast, I'd spend 50 minutes now just talking about this article. Already my heart's pounding. My skin has become inflamed. My ears have turned red. My respiration rate is up because I can't get this out in time.
Savage.
I'm aware of the shooting in the warehouse. I know that if I wanted to yank your chain, I would do a breaking news thing like every other radio show in America and become a vulture like all of the other people who like to talk about blood and murder. I don't want to talk about it. I'd rather get into this in a little more detail about these accusations against Kavanaugh. How accurate is her memory? How accurate is any child's memory? I'm reading you science articles, and if you missed the opening to the show because you were late for class, you can get it off my podcast tonight. The bottom line is that people imagine things happen to them as a child, and the more they imagine them, the more it's believable to them that it actually occurred, according to the scientific study that I have in my hand. But I want to go back to the study that I've been quoting from itself and read you one last paragraph by Gary, Manning, Loftus, and Sherman. These results suggest appropriate restraint in situations in which imagination is used as an aid in searching for or shoring up presumably lost memories, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, I want you to listen to the rest of the study. Since you are a PhD and a scientist, Dr. Ford, let me read you the rest of the abstract, Dr. Ford. When the police repeatedly ask a suspect to imagine his possible role in a murder he does not remember, or when a mental health professional repeatedly encourages a client to imagine an abusive childhood event, these imagination activities may unknowingly promote a greater belief that particular episodes occurred, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, the article concludes as follows, and I would appreciate your testimony, your reaction to this, Dr. Ford, since you're such a learned woman. The search for fact may create a fiction. Dr. Ford, the scientists conclude that the search for fact may actually create a fiction. Such is the power of imagination, Dr. Ford, long ago recognized by Keats in 1817. You know who Keats is, don't you? You know, Keats, the great British author, in 1817, you know what he said, Dr. Ford? In 1817, Keats wrote the following, Dr. Ford. The imagination may be compared to Adam's dream. He awoke and found the truth. Dr. Ford. The imagination may be compared to Adam's dream. He awoke and found the truth. Ladies and gentlemen of the Savage jury, I, Clarence Darrow Savage, rest my case. And now we open it up to you, the listeners of the show. Clarence Darrow Savage rests for the defense of Kavanaugh, and we move on to women only. In talking about the science of childhood memory and imagination, women of the Savage Nation, have you ever been sexually assaulted when you were a child? Not currently, not within the last 5 years, ladies. Do you remember every detail of the assault? Do you actually remember more about the incident or less about the incident? Or is it foggy? And men, did you ever engage in this behavior as described when you were a teenager? I will say this. I believe, and I said it the other day, I tweeted it the other day before a certain someone in talk radio who has never had an original idea in his life. In fact, if he had an original idea, he'd probably have a nervous breakdown. But what I said the other day in my tweet, which was picked up by his producers and turned into a show segment, which is, I've got to read it exactly. It's about the memory thing and the effect it's going to have on men. Here, this was on September 18th. Savage wrote the following. It was picked up by the blowhard on radio who made believe he was the one who originated it when his producers picked it up off my Twitter feed and made it into a monologue for him. And here's what I wrote. Now she won't testify against Kavanaugh. Vermin lawyer says he's guilty, must prove innocence. Will these Soviet tactics turn even liberal men against Dems? Meaning, will there be the opposite happening amongst the electorate that the evil Democrats are hoping for? Well, that was turned into an important monologue by someone who has never had an original thought in his life, which is great. But the fact is, I believe that even liberal men are starting to question whether they want this pushed because of one reason. Think about this carefully. If a man identifies as a liberal, and many of you who listen are probably liberals in your thinking or your politics. So the reason you're a liberal as a man is because you're a libertine. You want to do what you want to do. You want to use drugs. You want to have as much sex as possible. You don't have to lie to me. I see the smiles in the audience. You want to have a wild time, and you don't want any old conservative telling you what to do. You don't want some fuddy-duddy old guy telling you can't do this, you can't do that. You don't want Abraham, Isaac, and Moses brought into your mind. When you want something, you just want something. You want to have a good time, you want to have a good time. So you think you're a liberal. You're a social liberal for that reason. So now you're starting to think, wait a minute. I probably did something like this when I was in high school. Even if it wasn't 36 years ago, let's say it was 20 years ago. Do you, as a libertarian or a libertine or a liberal man, think that this is going to be a healthy thing for you in your future life? That any woman from high school that you may have had relations with, any one of them, can now come forward and say, j'accuse! And your life is ruined. You lose your family, you lose your life, you lose your bank account. Is this the nation that you want to be living in, where mean-faced, clipped-haired, venomous women with law degrees, mean-faced, clipped-haired, venomous, a pit viper is less to fear than a woman like that with a law degree. Vermin who should be put in jail for what they're doing to this country. Is that the country you want to live in? Because that's the country you are living in. And only you can stop it. We conservative men never wanted this guillotine to keep falling. When this first started to happen against liberals, yes, that's right. I wrote a monologue called For Whom the Bell Tolls, It Tolls for Thee. And it was after they got Matt Lauer. I never liked Matt Lauer. I think he's a talentless hack. I didn't care that he was a liberal. I thought he was a nothing. But even I said, For whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I said, another one bites the dust. Another big name shot down in flames. Matt Lauer, out at NBC over sexual allegations. Never proven, by the way. Just brought up by one of the mean-faced, clipped-haired, verminous lawyers who should be in Sing Sing for the rest of her life. His scalp added to the list of where you'll find the likes of Charlie Rose, Glenn Thrush of the New York Times, Mark Halperin from NBC, David Korn of Mother Jones, Michael Oriskis, I don't know who that is, of NPR, Jan Venner of Rolling Stone, Louis C.K., some verminous loudmouth lout, but he was named, Ben Affleck, and Harvey Weinstein. And just as I was absorbing the Matt Lauer News, Minnesota Public Radio cut ties with Garrison Keillor over allegations of improper behavior. And I asked, why does this keep happening? Why does this left-on-left-wing war continue? When I went on with the monologue. And I warned my conservative listeners as follows. It was September. When was this monologue? I don't even know. They didn't give me the date. It was months ago, maybe a year ago. I asked, should conservatives be celebrating every time another one of these left-wing loons falls? And I said the answer is no. Don't they see it could be them next? It could be anyone right now. There is a witch hunt going on right now that knows no boundaries. It's happening in the media, in Hollywood, and in the halls of Washington, D.C. And all someone has to do is shout Jack Hughes. I said this to you earlier this month. The trials are being conducted on little screens and your smartphones and on social media. Too many are being tried and convicted without anyone asking, is there any evidence beyond Jack Hughes? There is a type of civil war going on here, and the casualties are stacking up, I wrote. And the rules of this war favor one side, and the fallout isn't pretty. You may ask, for whom the bell tolls? Well, it tolls for thee. So I didn't celebrate when the liberals were going down. I warned you that what goes around comes around. And I see that it's come around. And this lawyer for Ms. Dr. Ford is a longtime Democrat donor. She defended Franken and Clinton. Her name is Deborah Katz, don't you know? Deborah Katz, the attorney, hired by Dr. Ford, and her claim that Supreme Court nominee Kavanaugh attacked her at a high school party, immediately called it a rape. Katz said it was a rape. Immediately she called it a rape. That's the case. And yet in Clinton's case, Katz took his word over that of Paula Jones. Katz, the fork-tongued devil, also defended Al Franken when several women accused him of sexual misconduct. Said the fork-tongued Ms. Katz. Now, Ms. Katz has ties to George Soros, according to the Washington Times, through her involvement with the Project on Government Oversight, POGO, an organization that has been directly funded by Soros' Open Society Foundation. Ms. Katz donated more than $8,000 to both former President Barack Obama's presidential campaigns. So we see a biased, twisted attorney, in my opinion, a vicious Katz type, the type that made me run from New York because I wanted nothing to do with them. Everyone had a relative like her in the family. And I actually didn't have a relative like her in the family. I was very lucky. But I know the type. New York is filled with them. And this is the type now that's trying to stop a Supreme Court nomination based upon, I think, false allegations, false charges of rape in a travesty of justice of the highest order. So I am reading to you some science to go with this today, which is how accurate are childhood memories. And I quoted the article, The Science of Childhood Memory and Imagination. And the article says there is imagination inflation, Ms. Katz. Ms. Katz, did you know that imagining a childhood event inflates the confidence that it occurred, Ms. Katz? Did you read that in law school? Whatever two-bit law school you may have gone to? Did you ever take a class in science, Ms. Katz? Why don't you ask Dr. Ford, your client, Ms. Katz, if she'd like to comment on this article about imagination inflation, Ms. Katz, before you ruin someone else's life, Ms. Katz. But then again, I'm not a senator, Savage. I'm talk show host, Savage. Now, I'm very worked up over this for a number of reasons. One, I don't think Kavanaugh is particularly conservative. As I said from the beginning, he's another Roberts. He's a middle-of-the-roader. Even if he got on the Supreme Court, he would disappoint us. He's not conservative enough for me. I don't like seeing anyone's reputation destroyed like this, particularly by vicious lawyers from the gutter and by psychopaths with PhDs from psycho degrees, rather, who make things up to destroy people's lives, especially when there's almost no way to confirm or deny that it happened. This is the old story, have you stopped beating your wife? How does a man defend against that? You didn't learn that? I learned it in the 5th grade. that's an example of something you can't win with. When you say to a man, have you stopped beating your wife? How you can't answer? How can you answer that question? You're a loser no matter what you say. Well, that's what they're doing to Kavanaugh. Do you remember raping her? Well, I never raped her. Oh, so you don't remember raping her? Well, I don't remember it. Oh, so you don't remember raping her, but you admit you raped her. This is what Ms. Katz apparently specializes in, unless she gets enough guilt from the other side. All right, I'll take a break before I say something I really mean.
Savage.
It is the Savage Nation. So apparently the accuser, J'accuse, will testify under her terms only, trying to delay, deny. The tactic of the left they've used since I've been studying politics. And I read you some scientific articles about the science of childhood memory and imagination. And there's a thing called imagination inflation, which you can study. And we also investigated Dr. Ford's distinguished background as a research scientist, and we found out that she pushes the morning after drug, RU486, to treat depression. Now, in and of itself, that's not a crime. But combined with the overall picture of her being part and parcel of the abortion industry, who is the number one force opposing Kavanaugh, I'm pretty sure you can understand why this evidence that I'm presenting today is of significance. But I have thrown the question to the audience on childhood memory, and I said, women, have you been sexually assaulted? Do you remember every detail? Men, did you engage in that behavior, blah, blah, blah? Let's take some calls in the limited time we have. Peter on KSEV in Texas, line 4. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, Shalom Aleichem, Michael. And sorry, I'm not buying it. I don't agree with the fact that children make up stuff, because, I was on both sides. I was on the abusive side by an elder man in my house, a renter in my house, this guy Manny, and I was also on the other side where I engaged in consensual, high school messing around. So I don't necessarily agree with that. In my opinion, Kavanaugh should withdraw, and Trump should just rescind his.
Yeah, but you're acting like an ignoramus. What do you mean, your opinion? That's not what we're talking about, your opinion.
Okay. So
no, I asked wait a minute, sir. Back up for a minute. I have proven to you that there's evidence in scientific literature that children's memories are rather fuzzy. Your memory may be clear, but you're one child. A scientific study is based upon many children. So what you remember may not be applicable to all children. Shouldn't that give you pause for thought that maybe this man is being railroaded by being falsely accused?
Could be, but he's also been on tape saying that what happens in high school stays in high school, so very, very much, he's been caught, in my opinion. He just needs to withdraw. It's too much bickering. You're spending hours and hours on this, and it's...
Oh, I'm the only one spending hours and hours on it, Mr. Molester out there. You agreed you molested girls, and you're accusing me of spending too much time trying to defend the man's honor.
Yeah, I didn't say that, sir, but...
And don't open with no Sholem Aleichem with me. I don't want to hear it anymore. This is not a Yiddish language broadcast show. I'm sick of this, that everyone thinks they know me. Sholem Aleichem. Another one, he's my old relative from somewhere. It's people like him that made me leave New York 50 years ago. They open you up with a knish, and then they give you a knife. Sholem Aleichem. Sholem Aleichem. Yeah. Alechem shalom to you. You know what he needs? He needs super beats. If he only took an atom of nitrogen and bound it with an atom of oxygen and had more nitric oxide, not only would his cardiovascular health go up, but his memory would go up. And he should call 800-481-0504 or go to savagelovesbeats.com and find out how he can get a free 30-day supply of super beats. And you too, because you'll get free shipping with your first purchase. So, you want to increase all of these things in your body, the good stuff? Call 800-481-0504 or go to savagelovesbeats.com today. When I come back, wait to see.
Savage. Warning, the Savage Nation contains adult language, adult content, psychological nudity. Listener discretion is advised. Now, Here he is, author of Liberalism is a Mental Disorder, Trump's War, and God, Faith, and Reason, Michael Savage.
Dear Professor Ford.
Dear Professor Ford.
Dear Professor Ford. We know how difficult it is to stand up to powerful people.
We want to thank you for publicly sharing your story of sexual violence.
As members of the Senate determine whether Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh
should serve as a Supreme Court Justice.
The Supreme Court Justice.
This context is critical.
The behavior you described was wrong.
Wrong, and runs directly counter to upholding the law and promoting justice.
He should not be confirmed.
He should not be confirmed.
He should not be confirmed.
We can also imagine how shocking
Get
and
the picture of the
overwhelming it
Hollywood
must
slime. The slimiest women in America who gravitate to Sunset Boulevard. And since it's not a podcast, I'll cut the sentence off there. I'll let you imagine what I think of them. Are all suddenly Vestal virgins, just offended by Brett Kavanaugh's behavior when he was a teenager. Even though they weren't there and they don't know what actually happened, they're convinced that he's worse than Hitler and he should be condemned. So this is what we're living with, a form of mass hysteria, as described in a book that no liberal dares read called Stop Mass Hysteria, which will be out in a few weeks. I wish it was out now. Well, I actually have a hardcover copy in my hands. If you order it online, you could probably get one. And I'm going to read something to you from that book to show you how poignant it is and how important it is you own it in your library, to use it as a piece of evidence. Now, remember, I'm going to tell you right now, by now, if anyone of my status had a book out, coming out in about 2 weeks, he'd be booked on every show on Fox News, from morning till night. Over and over again, they'd be fighting each other for me. Even CNN would have me on. I have not been booked on one television show in America because of the jealousy of a single man on Fox News, which runs it. He runs it like it's his own station. But I will read to you what you will not hear on Fox News. It's sad because some of the people on Fox News are good people, but they're intimidated by him. They're terrified by him. In The History of Mass Hysteria, page 17, I write the following, ladies. Rape and sexual assault are terrible actions, and those convicted of these crimes should be punished. You don't have to be a Supreme Court justice to grasp that. But the social justice warriors aren't interested in justice and fairness. They are interested in smashing the patriarchy, as they define it. Social justice warriors don't even attempt to disguise the fact that a broad, deeply rooted hatred of men underpins what they are doing. One leading feminist man-hater believes all men should whip themselves in public displays of penitence while declaring how they have hurt women in ways great and small. And I go on to say this is how a new wave of femme fascist, new phrase, inoculate themselves against any responsibility. One of them even wrote the following: false accusations very rarely happen, so even bringing it up borders on a derailment tactic. It shouldn't surprise anyone that madness is taking root in our education system. Part of the reason mass hysteria takes root more readily is that we no longer have a legitimate, responsible press to arrest it. Emphasize that, if you will. Today, the press skips from manufactured crisis to crisis, from Trump and groping, to Trump and Russians, to Trump and chaos on his staff, to Trump and white supremacy, to Trump and imagined racism. But unlike the proven crimes of Hillary Clinton, none of those issues are valid or sustainable. They are mass hysteria. In addition to all things Trump, today's hysteria often revolves around the concept, fear the male, whether he is Christopher Columbus or movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. The abuse of women by that Hollywood mover and shaker and major Democrat donor for whom former First Daughter Malia Obama interned rocked the news media for weeks. Weinstein wasn't unique. Women have been victimized by filmmakers probably as far back as the days of the pioneering Lumiere brothers of the late 1800s. The so-called casting couch, I write, is not a new phenomenon. After the first wave of accusations against Bill Cosby and eventually some white men, the left acted on its alleged inclusionary nature to indict all men. Media personality Tavis Smiley, business mogul Russell Simmons, sports figures Ike Taylor, and Marshall Falk have all either been suspended from their jobs or otherwise had their lives disrupted by accusations of sexual misconduct. Note that that's accusations, not convictions. In other words, they are guilty until proven innocent, and maybe not even then. The left now asserts that any form of contact constitutes unwanted sexual contact. A self-hating male New York Times columnist wondered, quote, how all women don't regard all men as monsters to be constantly feared. Close quote. Maybe it's because, unlike this observer, not all men view themselves as potential predators. I'm reading from The History of Mass Hysteria in my book, Mass Hysteria, where Chapter 1 is written, we've reached a new mass hysteria inflection point. And the opening line of this book is so poignant, I wish you could buy it today, but you can't except online. Here is the opening line. Tell me if you could ever forget this line. Hatred is in the air. We are living in an age of hate in which mental pollution is worse than air pollution. The most accessible and comprehensive of all unifying agents, hatred is spreading like a virus into all too willing hosts. It unifies knee-jerk liberals, no matter what their other differences. Hatred of conservatives, hatred of Trump and his voters is just one of the many cases of mass hysteria infecting American society today, but is likely the most destructive. I'll hold my fire on Stop Mass Hysteria, America's Insanity from the Salem witch trials to the Trump witch hunt, for now, because you can't buy it except online. But when you have it in your hand, you'll understand why I'm so agitated today by this accusation against all men in the form of Brett Kavanaugh. And I presented evidence to you, which, of course, went over the heads of Mr. Baruch HaShalom there, Shalom Aleichem himself called, and he didn't even hear a word I said. In the scientific literature on childhood memory and imagination, we learn from experts in the field, not one case, but experts who study these things, including Elizabeth Loftus as one of the authors. There's a thing called imagination inflation. Imagining a childhood event actually inflates confidence that it occurred, and I gave you the abstract in the study. Very important stuff that will not be heard on Fox News because of the intellectual barrier against what I have to offer you. But now I'm going to do something better for you. I have a wonderful article for you. Well, I can't squeeze it all in. There's so much going on all at once, you know. I'm going to read you an article very shortly on childhood memory that was written for me specially by a PhD who I gave the assignment to before the show. And I asked, could you please write something on this subject of childhood memory and human memory in general? And something jumped right out at me that you have to hear. Have you heard of a thing called the Innocence Project, funded by George Soros? You've heard about it, haven't you? Right? Now, what is the Innocence Project? They take known killers, known rapists, known murderers, and they try to prove that they're innocent. That's what the left does, right? There's a thing called the Innocence Project, funded by George Soros. So using the Innocence Project itself, Dr. Ford, what would you discover if you studied the results of the Innocence Project, Dr. Ford? I would like to ask you today before the Senate hearing, Dr. Ford. Well, Dr. Ford, they learned that eyewitness accounts of crimes are very inaccurate, Dr. Ford. According to the Innocence Project, it was determined that 75% of the 239 cases it reviewed had occurred due to inaccurate eyewitness testimony, Dr. Ford. Now, if you people on the left continuously try to tell us that known rapists, known murderers, people who have been raped by men, get up in court and say, but I was raped by this man. I have evidence that he raped me. And no, you weren't raped, because the Innocence Project, which is funded by George Soros, determined that 75% of the 239 cases it reviewed had occurred due to inaccurate eyewitness testimony. Does that mean all rapes are fake? Of course not. But you're now dealing with something that occurred 36 years ago when the accuser was a child, a young teen, and the accused was a teenager. Remember, he was not a man. He was not of age. They were both kids. Why is it that you take the word of one child and not the word of the other? Yesterday, driving after the show, I didn't even do a show yesterday, driving somewhere that I was going in the afternoon. I passed the children's playground in San Francisco, and I noticed that children were wrestling with each other on the pavement. You know, they're like kids do that. And this was a case of two boys wrestling. They must have been 10, 12 years old. One had the other one down on the ground and was pinning them down. I looked at him and I said to the guy driving me, I said, do you realize how sick we're living in a time they could accuse that boy of raping the other boy now because he has him down in a wrestling match? Do you realize how psychotic we're getting in this country? That we're letting the radical feminist man-haters take control of the entire country and destroy everybody and everything in their path, is what I said, as I then continued to discuss the mass hysteria that we're living in. And by the way, the next time you see the words mass hysteria accidentally coming out of the mouths of people in the media who don't credit my book, Stop Mass Hysteria, you'll know all about them. And by the way, one other thing, mark your calendars down for Monday. It's going to be someday, boy, in the media. Not only will the testimony occur, or likely occur, that's if she shows up. Now her lawyer, Miss Katz, not of the delicatessen fame, who to me has the credibility of a salami. Her lawyer, Miss Katz, I'd rather trust a salami more than I would her lawyer, Miss Katz, since she takes both sides of the aisle here. When it's a liberal, she's defending like Al Franken. He's as clean as the driven snow. When she's attacking on the other side, the human salami there, Miss Katz, calls it rape. Chiming in, Barbara Boxer called it rape. She wasn't there, Boxer. But right away, it's rape, it's rape, it's rape. She knew it was rape. Destroyed a man's reputation. Hey, Boxer, I pray to God that your husband or your son is never accused like you're accusing Kavanaugh. I pray to God that your husband, Boxer, or your lovely son is never falsely accused of rape, Boxer, because their lives will be ruined with mouths like yours. Boxer, look what they're doing to the society we're living in. All in the name of politics and the abortion racket. Never forget for a minute the kind of research that Dr. Ford engaged in, because I showed you that today on the show. No one in the media has done this yet. I can guarantee you before the words are out of my lips, it'll be on the media tonight. I'm sure that my best student on Fox News has already gotten it for tonight. She is a pusher of mifepristone, known as the morning after drug, RU486. Her studies all try to show that the morning after drug is useful for treating depression. Believe me, you've gotten your money's worth of today. You heard about the Innocence Project. The left wing says that 75% of the 239 cases it's reviewed had occurred due to inaccurate eyewitness testimony. So the left says eyewitness accounts, even eyewitness accounts of crimes, are inaccurate. That's what the left wing says. But now they're saying that Kavanaugh raped this girl, even though nobody was there. There were no eyewitnesses, but Barbara Boxer knows, because she has a super ability to see into things that happened years ago. She's so smart. And all of the Vestal virgins of Hollywood, they all know that this girl was raped, even though they weren't there. My friends, do you understand what I'm saying to you? A man's life and reputation, whether he's appointed or not, is irrelevant now. They have tainted his life, his wife, and his children forever. This is the kind of smear tactic we would have seen during the Stalin years in the Soviet Union. And there's only one side pushing this agenda, and that's their cousins here in the Democrat Socialist Movement, better known as the Democrat Party USA.
Savage.
So before you go away and start saying I'm a sexist male and you shouldn't listen to me, I'm on record saying rape and sexual assault are terrible actions, and those convicted of these crimes should be punished. You don't have to be a Supreme Court justice to grasp that. But the social justice warriors aren't interested in justice and fairness. They are interested in smashing the patriarchy as they define it. It's a deeply rooted hatred of men which underpins what they are doing. It's all in Stop Mass Hysteria, America's insanity from the Salem witch trials to the Trump witch hunt. We are all living in the new Salem. You now don't live in America. You now live in Salem. Welcome to the new Salem. That's the world you're living in as a result of the army of man-haters, with law degrees in particular. So I've asked you if your childhood memory of assault when you were a child. Do you remember every detail? KSFO, Rochelle, line 3, you're up on the Savage Nation. What happened to you? What do you remember?
I remember, I can just tell you, I'm the youngest of 9 kids. Every single one of us will have a different version of a story, an event, an incident. Every one of us have our own version that we will all swear to. And then
you mean even of non-traumatic events?
Non-traumatic events, you know.
So, in other words, if you were to bring up a Thanksgiving dinner that occurred when you were a child, all of the 9 children in your family would have a different version.
A complete different version of it. Something as simple as our dog that ate our chickens and buried them upside down. Everyone has a different version of that story.
So your point is that a childhood memory from many years ago is quite fluid.
Absolutely, it can be. If one person, the sister sitting next to you, say, "Oh yeah, I remember when that happened." Oh well, now my memory is 10 times heightened because now she has given me yes.
Well, in this study on the science of childhood memory, there's a phrase called imagination inflation, which is new to talk radio. It's new to literature. It's new to the discussion. And it's important that you remember the words imagination inflation. And the study says that by imagining a childhood event, you actually inflate the confidence that it occurred. If you imagine something happened to you, I know this to be a fact. As a former anthropologist, well, I can't do it. I need an hour now, not 10 seconds. I can't do this anymore.
Savage.
Breaking news that I can't give you right now, but I will tell you there will be breaking news about my show that you will hear on this show Monday. It's going to be one of the biggest days in radio because of the hearings, which I do hope occur. I hope that Ms. Katz permits her client to get up there and make her accusations so all the world can judge for themselves whether they're accurate or not. But I will also have an announcement for my vast audience. After almost a quarter of a century on radio, a revolution will occur that I cannot tell you about until Monday. It will be released to the media on Monday. I will tell you about it on Monday. All I can say is it's very positive. It's an innovation that no one has yet done in the history of talk radio. That's as far as I can go. And don't ask me about it. How's that? Just be sure you're here on Monday. Be in class on Monday. You must be in class on Monday. So, human memory is the whole issue. It's he said, she said. His memory says he wasn't even there. She said she was raped. Actually, she never said she was raped. Barbara Boxer and the vicious anti-male feminist said she was raped. But you see, human memory, according to the science of memory, is unreliable. And Dr. Ford, through no fault of her own, could be suffering from the same unconscious memory problems that anyone listening to this show is vulnerable to. And as I said to you earlier, eyewitness accounts even of crimes are inaccurate. The so-called Innocence Project, pushed by the left, trying to show you that even a murderer is not a murderer. Well, the Innocence Project, the left-wing project, determined that 75% of the 239 cases it reviewed had occurred due to inaccurate eyewitness testimony. Really? Elizabeth F. Loftus, a distinguished professor of cognitive sciences at UC Irvine, has conducted extensive research on the malleability of human memory. Dr. Loftus has testified at many criminal trials, and she points out that memory is subject to social bias, suggestibility, and retroactive interference. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's look at social bias. If you dislike a particular sort of person, you're more likely to recall a person in that category as the perpetrator of a crime. So let's say you have a bias against black men. You're more likely to recall a person being a black man as the perpetrator of a crime that you may have witnessed through the corner of your eye. Retroactive interference is when recent information intrudes into an old memory. So, if you see a video of a person sitting alone on a park bench and later see them interacting with another person, you may recall the second person as having been in the park bench video even though he wasn't. Suggestibility in one Miss Loftus study, people were shown, in one study by Dr. Loftus, people were shown a video of a car crash. Car crash. Well, later, a written survey asked them what they'd seen in the car crash video. If the survey question used the word smashed, people misrecalled seeing broken glass in the video, even though there was no broken glass. If the words hit or bump were used in it, they would say there was no glass. Another famous cognitive psychologist, the late Amos Tversky of Stanford University, showed that recent current events can affect memory. If a terrible plane crash has just been reported, you might recall a plane crash occurring in an action picture you saw earlier, even though none actually occurred. How does this relate to the Christine Ford recollection? Well, according to my expert who looked this up for me, I am reading that she could be remembering an assault by another boy at another time, but a dislike of Kavanaugh and his friends intruded at the time or later to cause her to associate Kavanaugh with the event. Perhaps someone even told Ford that Kavanaugh was a bad sort and likely to do such things. Maybe recent events, such as the Me Too movement, have elevated a mild bit of misbehavior to the level of full-on assault. So if I were called on Monday to Congress, which I have not been, as an expert witness on the subject, what you would get from Dr. Savage is a little treatise on the science of childhood memory and imagination, and I would talk about imagination inflation, citing the Psychonomic Bulletin and Review by Gary Manning, Loftus, and Sherman from June 1996, Volume 3, Issue 2, on counterfactual imaginings and their far-reaching implications. I would also bring up the fact that Dr. Ford pushes mifepristone, which is the morning after pill, in treating depression. Now you say, well, what does that have to do with this? I'll let you figure it out. She's tied into the abortion industry, in my estimation. And it's the abortion industry per se, not alone, but the abortion industry that's deeply, deeply opposed to Kavanaugh's appointment, for that matter, any conservative's appointment to the Supreme Court, because they're afraid that their game will be up. They're afraid that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. I'm not so sure that Kavanaugh would do that, by the way, but they're so paranoid that they lose their billions of dollars a year in baby body parts and things like that, that they'll do anything, including destroy a man's name and reputation and his entire family in order to hold on to their money. That's what I would say. I'd say it's straight up in the U.S. Senate, which is why I didn't run. Instead, you have Dianne Feinstein from California, a distinguished senator from California who stops at nothing to destroy reputations while saying, oh, I didn't do anything yesterday, the other night. I love Feinstein. I love what she said. Oh, we don't know what's truthful. After destroying a man's reputation, I don't even know if it's truthful. After withholding it for 30 days, which is, by the way, a violation in a court of law, which this is not. If you withhold discovery until after, let us say, a certain period of time, that discovery is not valid. It doesn't count. It's not used in the trial. In fact, there are rules against it, and the lawyer could be thrown out of court, probably lose his license. What Feinstein did would result in the loss of a law license if she did it in the court of law. But what does that matter to her court of law? Are you joking? What court of law does Feinstein ever answer to? Here's some breaking news. Katz pulls out of Dem fundraiser. Ugh, Katz. Think of corned beef, pickles. Democratic Senator Tammy Baldwin's campaign listed Brett Kavanaugh accusers, attorneys, as headliners at a Washington fundraiser slated to take place next month, according to a copy of the invitation obtained by the Crescent News Network. Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Ford, is being represented by attorneys Deborah Katz and Lisa Banks, both of whom are listed as headliners in a cocktails and conversation event for Baldwin, a Wisconsin Demon Cat who is facing re-election this fall. People were asked to contribute up to $1,000 to attend the October event. A source familiar with the matter said it's slated to take place at their law firm, Katz, Marshall, and Banks. After CNN contacted the Baldwin campaign and the attorneys, Katz called CNN to say that the event was being canceled. The event was canceled. I wonder why somebody running for office as a Democrat would cancel having Katz at a cocktails and conversation event. How do you like that? That's an interesting thing now. Katz has become toxic to these people? Can you conclude that? Well, Katz doesn't say so. Katz says that's not the reason. She said, no, we're just not going to, we're going to be focused on the issues involving the Kavanaugh confirmation process, so we can't attend. That's the reason. Yeah, you got to believe Katz. After all, she's a lawyer, and you know how believable most lawyers are. The event was scheduled before Dr. Ford made the allegations. The spokesmouth for Baldwin said, Dr. Ford's lawyers are no longer involved in the event. Yeah, really? No, and it's not because most people would puke if Katz was there. They were afraid that their drinks would be poisoned. Oh, boy, what a world we're living in. So we're dealing with memory now. Memories, dreams, and imaginations. And we're dealing with so many different things at once that the only way to fight these people is tooth and claw and use their own tactics on them, which is why I am not in the Senate and why I am a talk radio, because I couldn't do this in the Senate. They wouldn't let me. If I ever was called as, let's say I was on that committee this Monday, and I said I'm going to bring up the fact that she pushes the morning after pill for depression, she's tied into the abortion industry, that has everything to do with her bias against Kavanaugh, they would say, hush, hush, Savage, you can't say that. The soft shoe Republicans, the country club Republicans like Grassley, the check pants Republicans, the golfer Republicans would say you can't do it. So they're going to lose on Monday. They're going to be intimidated by Katz and associates before they even walk in. The Katz will tear their eyes out. Katz and her friends will walk in there, rip the eyes out of these guys. And these men are afraid to fight back. They don't know how. And B, if they did know how, they wouldn't do it because they'd be afraid to be called names or something like that. But I feel if that you're in a war, which you are in, then a war must be fought as wars are always fought, quite thoroughly. Let's put it to you that way. And what I presented to you and the rest of the world today on the radio show will be posted by this evening in a short article on the science of fallibility of memory of children, number one, and on Dr. Ford's research to do with the morning after pill. Whether she is funded by the morning after pill manufacturers or not, I do not know, but I would ask her that under oath. I would say it's relevant. And no matter what her lawyer would say, I'd say, Dr. Ford, I read with interest your study on the use of RU486 in treating depression, which is rather interesting, because I didn't know that this morning after pill could be used for depression. I know it causes a lot of side effects. Have you received any funding from the manufacturer of this abortion pill, Dr. Ford? I could just see her reaching for the fainting couch. I would hear the gavels going down. I would see Turban Durbin jumping up and screaming, how dare you ask that of Dr. Ford? I could hear shouts in the audience. Dr. Ford, do not answer that. Dr. Ford, please, Dr. Ford, do not answer that low blow. It would be like the assassination of Lincoln in the theater there. Ford, of all things. Well, she asked for it. Now the whole world knows who Dr. Ford is. And all you got to do is do a little research, as I did, and find out what her studies are on, what she's kind of really interested in, as they say in academia. I never use the words kind of. I hate them. That's an academic leftist thing, kind of. Whenever you hear a male saying kind of, you know what kind of male he is. Kind of, sort of. I don't work at Google. I don't work at Facebook. I don't wear undershirts to work. Okay? But the thing is, kind of, I don't like the word kind of. Either it is or it isn't. What do you mean kind of? How could something be kind of? Well, you want me to use the phrase kind of? Ford is a kind of liar because childhood memory is malleable, number one. Number two, she pushes the RU486 drug as a cure for a treatment for depression. What does that tell you? You can't put two and two together? It means she's tied into the abortion industry. So if she's tied into the abortion industry by pushing RU486 for treating depression, it means she's terrified that Kavanaugh might be appointed and he might overturn Roe v. Wade, which is all they care about, to keep the good times rolling. And therefore, it's a very important point, in my opinion. But having said that, do not misinterpret what I am saying in the big picture. Because as I wrote, it's in writing, it's set in stone in Stop Mass Hysteria. Rape is about the most serious crime a man could commit. It doesn't get any worse. And I'm on record for 20 years saying the same thing. If a man is convicted of real rape, he should be castrated as far as I'm concerned. But you don't have to be a Supreme Court justice to grasp that. But the social justice warriors aren't interested in justice and fairness. They're interested in smashing the patriarchy as they define it. And that's on page 17 in Stop Mass Hysteria.
Savage.
Look, I can't tell you how bad the home security is. It's broken. The old legacy companies are stuck in the 80s. They lock you into 3-year contracts. They hit you with hidden fees. They use crummy technology. So I want you to use Simply Safe because it's the right way to go. And they started 10 years ago with a mission to fix the home security industry. And what they did was they cut out salesmen, middlemen, contracts. They made it easy for you to set up your own system. You don't need a contractor to do it. And with Simply Safe, you get professionally monitored 24/7 protection for just $15 a month. And that's your home being protected by police dispatch and fire dispatch. Everyone loves this system. How easy it is to set up and use. And right now, Simply Safe protects over 2 million people. It should be you, too. They've won Editor's Choice Awards from CNET, PC Mag, and Wirecutter. Please go to simplysafesavage.com today to order your Simply Safe system, and you will get a 60-day risk-free trial. It's simplysafesavage.com to protect your home and family today. Write it down and get on it right away. simplysafesavage.com. Now, before this hour comes to an end, I got to play Dianne Feinstein after ruining a man's name and reputation, destroying his wife and children's reputation. Listen to what she has to say in clip 6.
I have no say. I'm the lead Democrat, so this is all up to the Republican side. I can't say everything's truthful. I don't know.
Oh, you don't know. You don't know. The red heron doesn't know. The red heron doesn't know, but it didn't stop her from destroying a man's name and reputation. Now, what if someone accused her of spying for the communist Chinese government? And then they said, well, I don't really know if it's true. But, I mean, it's up to the Democrat side because I'm the lead Republican. I don't know if it's true that the Chinese spy who drove for her for 16 years was a spy that she knew. I'm not saying she did. I don't know if it's true or not. Now, what would happen if someone did that? That's what she just did to Kavanaugh, Miss Clean Skirts. Miss Clean Skirts from San Francisco, the dirtiest city in the world. The corruption in San Francisco is worse, I allege, than any city in the United States for sure, maybe in the whole Western Hemisphere. I told you what I'm going to do for you. I'm going to show you Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi's actual backyards. I don't mean where they grow tomatoes, because I don't think they grow tomatoes. I'm going to take a trip down Ellis Street with a camera, and I'm going to show you the cities of vermin, bums living in tents, crapping in the streets, because when I actually saw it, I couldn't believe it existed to this extent. And these are the women who have the nerve to pretend that they're managing a city correctly. Oh, I know they're not local. I know they're too big to manage a city. But, you know, they live here. You would think that as federal authorities, they would do something about the streams of urine and feces in the street, the needles, the assaults that go on every day in San Francisco, once beautiful city, until it was infested by liberalism and the city was destroyed. And now they're trying to destroy a man's name and reputation. This army of illegitimi non carborundum is what was said in ancient Rome. And all I can say is, if there was a Republican on that committee who had any nerve, they would quote what I delivered today on the Savage Nation with regard to the fallibility of memory of children, number one. They should get an expert on that, or rip me off if they want. And number two, the RU-486 story that I told you about with Dr. Ford's research.
Michael Savage, a host like no other.
Maybe it did happen, maybe it didn't happen. You have no evidence. How do you know? How accurate is a child's memory 20, 30 years later? There's science on the issue. Imagination inflation is what it's called. Imagining that a childhood event occurred, if you just imagine it, it inflates confidence that it actually occurred. Important study by Gary, Manning, and Loftus and Sherman. Psychonomic Bulletin and Review, 1996, Volume 3, Issue 2, 208 to 214. And listen to some of the key words. Many of you went to college and you took some psychology. Here's what they conclude about childhood imagination, childhood memory. People often imagine the past as being different from what it really was. That's the first sentence in this article. Did you hear that? Clint, is that amazing? People often imagine the past as being different from what it really was. Many investigators have argued that people spontaneously imagine alternatives to real events more in some settings than in others. These mental musings, called counterfactual thinking, have far-reaching implications. They influence judgments of regret, perceived happiness, and causality. And I can read more. I'm not going to read you the whole study. I want to speed to the end of this scientific article because they give you the methods of the study and all as they do in scientific papers. And then they read and they give you the results. It's astounding how they conclude this article. Of course, I'm out of time already. If it was a podcast, I'd spend 50 minutes now just talking about this article. Already my heart's pounding. My skin has become inflamed. My ears have turned red. My respiration rate is up because I can't get this out in time.
Savage.
I'm aware of the shooting in the warehouse. I know that if I wanted to yank your chain, I would do a breaking news thing like every other radio show in America and become a vulture like all of the other people who like to talk about blood and murder. I don't want to talk about it. I'd rather get into this in a little more detail about these accusations against Kavanaugh. How accurate is her memory? How accurate is any child's memory? I'm reading you science articles, and if you missed the opening to the show because you were late for class, you can get it off my podcast tonight. The bottom line is that people imagine things happen to them as a child, and the more they imagine them, the more it's believable to them that it actually occurred, according to the scientific study that I have in my hand. But I want to go back to the study that I've been quoting from itself and read you one last paragraph by Gary Manning, Loftus, and Sherman. These results suggest appropriate restraint in situations in which imagination is used as an aid in searching for or shoring up presumably lost memories, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, I want you to listen to the rest of the study. Since you are a PhD and a scientist, Dr. Ford, let me read you the rest of the abstract, Dr. Ford. When the police repeatedly ask a suspect to imagine his possible role in a murder he does not remember, or when a mental health professional repeatedly encourages a client to imagine an abusive childhood event, these imagination activities may unknowingly promote a greater belief that particular episodes occurred, Dr. Ford. Dr. Ford, the article concludes as follows, and I would appreciate your testimony, your reaction to this, Dr. Ford, since you're such a learned woman. The search for fact may create a fiction. Dr. Ford, the scientists conclude that the search for fact may actually create a fiction. Such is the power of imagination, Dr. Ford, long ago recognized by Keats in 1817. You know who Keats is, don't you? You know, Keats, the great British author, in 1817, you know what he said, Dr. Ford? In 1817, Keats wrote the following, Dr. Ford. The imagination may be compared to Adam's dream. He awoke and found the truth, Dr. Ford. The imagination may be compared to Adam's dream. He awoke and found the truth. Ladies and gentlemen of the Savage jury, I, Clarence Darrow Savage, rest my case. And now we open it up to you, the listeners of the show. Clarence Darrow Savage rests for the defense of Kavanaugh, and we move on to women only. In talking about the science of childhood memory and imagination, women of the Savage Nation, have you ever been sexually assaulted when you were a child? Not currently, not within the last 5 years, ladies. Do you remember every detail of the assault? Do you